Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are in the combat zone. I am Joe, and he is Nick. And this is the place where the enemy only has four things to say. Take cover, bail out, abandon ship, and we surrender.
Excellent. Well done. Well done, Joseph. Well, I got to read the game.
I didn't even rehearse it. I read it. I wrote it out on a cue card.
Now, I wasn't going to let anybody know that.
Well, it's okay. We're honest here. We like to tell the truth about things, even when it gets, some people in trouble.
Yeah, well, that's never happened. Wait, yes, it has. Anyway, welcome to the Combat Zone, folks. We have quite the list of topics, and as you can imagine, if you've been paying attention to the news in the last few days, there is no shortage. All right, I thought we'd probably start, Joseph, if it's okay with you. We don't have to do a lot of time on this, but I think the passing of George, former president of the United States, number 41, I think he is.
George Bush. George Bush. H.W. Bush.
Right.
George Senior. George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right.
Correct.
And he was 95, a World War II vet, and was...
Right. The last of the World War II vets, I think, that served as president.
I believe so. I think, who replaced him? Was that
Bill Clinton?
Yeah, he did a lot of things, but serving in the military wasn't one of them.
I don't know. I don't think he served in the military or the National Guard. That's President Clinton, that is.
Yeah, that's
Bill
right.
Clinton, Mr. Clinton, former governor of Arkansas.
And
we're not going to get into any of the allegations against him while he was governor of Arkansas.
That's not the point of the conversation.
Stuff. No. Let's keep it. Let's keep it civil, nonpartisan,
right.
Non-political, non-legal.
Non-legal, I like that.
Yeah.
Now the Canadian government sent down, and I've got it here. Okay, here it is. There were all kinds of dignitaries from all over the world.
Sure.
But I guess Justin Trudeau was too busy trying to find some clean used socks to sell. So rather than attend himself, he sent down Scott Bryson and the Canadian ambassador to the United States, David McNaughton. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney was there.
Yeah, he gave one of the eulogies.
He did. And they were very close friends.
They were close friends.
And did you know
Correct.
he loved to fish in Newfoundland? He was a big Atlantic salmon fisherman.
President Bush?
Yes.
Senior?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
I found that out. And it doesn't surprise me. It's one of the most beautiful corners of the world. And if you're into hooking 40 pounds of uncontrollable Titan missile, then that's where you want to go. It's just
stunning. I hear.
Oh, well.
I've never salmon fished in the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, you need to put that in your bucket list because it's something you won't forget.
No pun intended.
True enough. So at any rate, they have he's only the fourth or fifth president to be buried from what is the name of the facility they held his eulogy in?
Where they held what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
The ceremony.
The National Cathedral?
That's it.
Today?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew it was there, but I didn't know he was...
He's only been the fourth or fifth. Now, they've held memorial services.
The actual funeral service in the National Cathedral.
Right. And then they went down to Houston yesterday to have a private family funeral and lay him to rest there. Because that's where the Bushes are from.
Clearly they didn't do that yesterday because the funeral service was in Washington today. And the casket was in Washington, too.
Okay, well, whatever. That's what the way...
No, I was listening to it today. That's why I was listening to it live, yeah.
Okay, but the point I'm making is whether you liked his politics or not, he certainly had quite the mark on the world stage.
He did.
He played a key role in bringing the Cold War to an end. Everybody gives Reagan the credit for that, and they should. He played the...
I do. I think that Reagan was really the guy when it comes to ending the Cold War or really winning the Cold War. I think that George H.W. Bush played some role, but and he happened to be the beneficiary of the Reagan presidency coming directly afterwards. So the Berlin Wall fell under his watch. Right. It's funny. There was a cartoon that one of the eulogists referred to at the service today, and that I had seen a number of years ago, and it was a caricature of George H.W. Bush sitting behind his desk, and you have to picture that, they had drawn him with the big ears and everything like that.
Right.
And so there he is behind the desk, and he's sort of sitting there, and he's going, let me see. Ended the Cold War, Berlin Wall fell, Germany on the way to reunification, and 3 or 4 other things, and returned all of my calls, and it's still only noon. My understanding is that he was quite organized. He had things laid out very well, and George H.W. Bush was a tremendously successful person in everything that he did. He fought in the war. He was a fighter pilot. Correct. Sorry. Yes, in the U.S. Navy. Fought against the Japanese. Was a very successful business person, and then very successful politician. He was at one point in time the director of the CIA. So he had a long and distinguished career in public service as well. And then, of course, as the president. And by all accounts, he was a wonderful person. Not just a successful politician, a successful businessman, but just an all-round decent guy.
Nice guy. Yeah.
And he and his wife, Barbara Bush, who passed away in the springtime of this year, had been married for over 70 years. I think it was 73 years.
Right.
That's a long time to be married.
They were the longest married first couple in U.S. history.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yep.
It doesn't surprise me.
And there's a letter that he wrote to her back in 1943 on the announcement of their engagement. It really is very beautiful. It talks about how much he misses her, and very flowery. And a lot of guys would, today guys don't write letters like that. They
tweet.
They tweet, yeah, exactly.
Well, if they even tweet.
If they do that much. But
sure.
It was really very eloquent. It was very, very flowery, and you could see the look on the host's face on the different videos that I was watching, and they were just blown away by his eloquence and the obvious love that he had for his wife. And you don't last 73 years in a marriage if you don't love each other. There's just no way you're going to get through it. So hats off to our condolences to the Bush family, and he was, by all accounts, a remarkable man. It's unfortunate, I think, that he was unable to carry on for 2 terms.
Well, it was the circumstances were, they were different. Times change. He certain economic issues had come up on his watch as well, whether they were his fault, not his fault. He broke a promise. Hard to say after we've just talked about how decent and honorable he was, but this is part and parcel of the American presidency. Is people. In terms of international power and prestige, there is nobody as powerful, frankly, as the President of the United States. But when it comes to domestic policy, the President of the United States, he or she, has a lot of constraints, and Congress wields a lot of power. And I mentioned this a few times to some of my friends who are very big Trump supporters. When he was running for president, and they were talking about all the great things he was going to do, and I cautioned them that it's not so easy to do a number of the things like that he wants to do as president of the United States here in Canada or in Great Britain or anywhere under the Westminster system, where you have a cabinet government led by a prime minister. The prime minister essentially has a lot of power, wields a lot of power that a president in the United States doesn't have domestically. So a good example of this, Nick, is the building of this wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. It's very easy for the president of the United States or somebody running to be president of the United States to say, I'm going to build that wall. I'm going to build that wall. I'm going to build the wall. And people voted for Trump. And many people voted for Trump for that reason.
Right.
But, he hasn't built the wall yet. And why hasn't he built the wall? Because he has to have money to build the wall. The president of the United States has no money. He only has as much money as
his own personal
the Congress votes allocates.
Okay.
So, unless you have now, there's that raises a bigger question in the United States with respect to the the commitment of the Republican Party to building the wall because, of course, they had a Republican president,
right.
Trump.
They're
a Republican
in charge of both houses. They could have passed the bill.
Right, House of Representatives, and a Republican majority in the Senate. So, if they had wanted to build a wall, or if the Republican Party, Republican-controlled Congress, had wanted to allow the Republican president to build the wall, they would have allocated the funds to do it while they had control. Now, of course, they have more control over the Senate because they have a larger majority. I think they have 53 or something like that, members of a 100-member Senate. But they don't control the House of Representatives anymore, so it becomes a much more complicated problem for the president.
I've always wondered why, and this is a little off track, we'll get back on track here in a second, but when when Donald Trump was talking about building the wall and how he's going to make Mexico pay for it, I thought he's on the right track, but not the government. He shouldn't be going after the government. He should be going after the drug cartels. He should be going after the drug lords.
Oh, sure,
and seizing their money and using that to build the wall because there's plenty of it.
But I don't know how much money there is, but they do go after these cartels, and they do seize their money when they find it and catch it and prosecute the offenders. And of course, this fellow now, El Chapo, I think is his nickname, is on trial. A big Mexican drug lord was caught in Mexico and extradited to the United States, and he's just now standing trial, I think, in New York City for drug trafficking and importing or whatever the charges are against him. And if they find his money, wherever they find it, they're going to seize it, etc. So, but look, enough said about it. The fact is that, I've got off topic a little bit talking about Trump and et cetera. But the big problem that George H.W. Bush had, I think, towards the end of his first term in office and first and only term, was that he broke a promise that he wasn't going to raise taxes. And of course, that's the situation in the United States, is that you end up having to make these compromises. And in order to get his way on certain other things, he had to agree to allow for taxes to go up. And a lot of people on the right of the political spectrum, voters, conservative voters and Republican voters, never forgave him for that. So I think, without getting into a lot of detail and not pretending that I'm an expert in his presidency, that played a significant role in his not ending up being reelected. That and, organization and lots of things go into winning elections. And at that time, the Democrats were they just ran better campaigns on the ground, identifying voters, making sure that they got out and voted, organizing their election campaigns, etc. So, a few of these things conspired to undermine President Bush Sr.'s reelection bid, and as a result, notwithstanding the fact that I think he had a tremendously successful presidency in and of itself,
right,
he was not reelected as president. And they got, Bill Clinton after that. And as I said, we're not going to get into discussing his legal issues or anything like that.
No. There are certain things when you watch a campaign that are what you would call turning points. And I think that one of the things that really undid George Bush's chances at the White House was Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on the Late Night Show. That, I still say, is one of those great moments when the tide turns. It's like when Trump told the media that you're fake news, get out of here, I don't want to talk to you, at that press conference, and the country went nuts. And that's when Trump won the election. It took a while, that wasn't it by itself, but that was the turning point, I think. And the same thing with Bush. There were certain things like that happened that just kind of, helped drive the nails home and seal the end of his political career. With that said, it is, it's a day, I won't call it a sad day. Yes, for the family it certainly is. I mean, the man was 95. It's not like he was cut down in his prime. He had a long and eventful life and a very successful one. So I think it's more of a day of reflection, a day of, looking back over your own life and saying, okay, where am I in life? How much time, do I spend on trying to be a better person? Looking at the life of George W. and saying there was a lot to admire about this man, and I think that's what funerals like this, state funerals, are for. They give the country a chance to pause and reflect.
Another thing about George Bush Sr. Is that he was a man of very deep faith.
Yes.
And one of the things that I understand he regretted when he left public life was that he didn't talk more about faith, and his faith in particular, as a public office holder. And that's a sentiment I share. Knowing what I've heard, and what I've learned about the man and his deep and abiding faith as a committed Christian, I think that he was a committed Christian. I'm not referring to myself, of course. I'm not a Christian. I'm Jewish. But just to make sure I clarify that for all my friends that are going, what, he converted when he was away last week?
You wouldn't believe how effective I can be when I want to be.
Yeah, you Catholics. Where was I going with this? No, it was... I understand and wish that he had been more worn his faith more on his sleeve, because he was a president really in almost like a transitional time. Like you could look at Reagan and look at Clinton and see that these are two very different eras. I think it's fair to say.
I think so too. I think you're absolutely right.
And so George Bush Sr. was sort of bridging that, and I'm wondering if had he been more open, more wearing his faith on his sleeve, making it more not palatable, but okay to be openly Christian, especially as a public figure, whether or not he might have at a minimum slowed and perhaps even stemmed the rapid decline of Christianity in the public square. I don't know. I'm just, idly speculating.
I think you might be right, and we'll get into that topic a little bit later in the show about the decline of. It's not as okay as it used to be a Christian in today's society.
Well, still, it's not that you're persecuted for it, and although maybe to a certain degree you are, and that's a growing trend that we'll talk about a little bit in the next segment. But yeah, it's he was a really a first class person by all accounts. I think his son George W. Bush, the 43rd president of the United States, was cut from the same cloth, and the circumstances when he was president were different, but there were many similarities as well. But and I'm saying this not as a partisan, but it's going to come across in a partisan way. But I think the real decline in the presidency that we've seen in our lifetime in the United States really began with Bill Clinton. I think that Bill Clinton, in many areas, was sincere in his belief and what he wanted to achieve. And interestingly enough, Bill Clinton himself was very flexible when it came to liberal and left wing principles. When the Republicans took over both the Senate and the House of Representatives during Clinton's presidency, he was very pragmatic and he worked with them. He didn't fight them along the way. And a lot of what Bill Clinton is known for, things like balancing the budget, welfare reform, and these things, were actually things where he was pushed into by a Republican-controlled Congress. And, I hate to say it because there are a lot of people that don't like the guy, but a lot of what Bill Clinton was able to accomplish was really the brainchild of Newt Gingrich. I'm a very big Newt Gingrich fan. I don't know how good a politician he's ever been, but certainly as an ideas person, he's not he's a flawed human being. He's had his issues, family issues, etc. I'm not going to throw stones at people because of that, because it happens a lot. But certainly in a macro sense, he really pushed and things I think were very good for the American family, that were good for the United States overall, and he hasn't gotten a lot of credit for it, to be perfectly frank.
Well, I do know this much about Clinton. I was driving a tractor trailer in the 90s when he was the when he was the president. And you can thank Bill Clinton for the rapid rise of right-wing radio. Guys like Hannity, guys like Rush Limbaugh, they used Bill Clinton to propel themselves to unbefore-heard-of heights. Ben Shapiro too, the same kind of thing. Ben's a little young to have been part of that, but he certainly is riding on those coattails. So from that perspective, it allowed for a much healthier discourse in the American population about what is conservative, what is liberal, and what a president represents, and those kinds of things. And let's face it, Rush Limbaugh during the 90s, even today, is the king of talk radio, all because the vast majority of that was built on the foundation of pillorying, I almost said Hillary, pillorying Bill on a daily basis. And it was just one thing after another because there was just so much content there.
Right, but it's not just, I think it's important to remember when it comes to conservative talk radio in the United States that it's not limited to just the national political. I mean, there are people... and this is a good thing, and I think this is the kind of thing that we're trying to do here with our show, Nick. And I wish that we saw more of. Certainly, Ezra Levant with Rebel Media is doing a pretty good job in his own right, and in the context of what the things that he's trying to achieve. A fellow by the name of Andrew Lawton, as you probably know, down in Southern Ontario. Now he's not doing talk radio right now. He ran for the Conservatives in the last provincial general election, unfortunately was not elected. And I'd like to see him get back into talk radio. And here in Canada's capital, of course, as you well know, having had some personal dealings, CFRA, which was by and large a conservative talk radio station that I think was very influential in that respect. It's no longer that. It was bought out by Bell, the parent company of CTV. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't have more of it here because I think it's important. The mainstream media, it's either left wing in its commentary, or it's left wing in its presentation of the news. And let me be clear on this, Nick. I don't personally believe in an unbiased media. I think that everybody, including if you're just talking about reportage, everybody brings their personal biases to what they do. And so even if you're not overtly injecting your personal bias into your reporting, if you're just a reporter and not a commentator, your editorial selections, what you emphasize and what you don't emphasize, and all of these things are influenced by your philosophical persuasions, your ideologies. Everybody has ideology. Everybody has ideological baggage that they bring to the table. Okay, there's nobody who is a blank slate. So the idea of having a perfectly unbiased media, I think, I just don't think it exists. And I think that's why you have to have freedom of the press, is because you want to be able to allow the press, members of the press, to present what they're presenting in the way that they're presenting without being, and if you're reporting, clearly there are lines you don't cross. Okay, so it's not. I think that you're still going to have biases, but I think that you have to have less bias. Let me put it that way when you're reporting as opposed to commentating.
When I was on terrestrial radio, one of the things
as opposed to extraterrestrial radio.
Well, that's what we're on now. We've been taken up by the mothership. We just haven't told anybody yet.
Now, somebody mentioned that to me this week. They said, Nick was on terrestrial radio. Does that mean you guys are now on extraterrestrial radio?
Yes.
I said, yes, absolutely.
We're actually beaming this to you from Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, when we talk about being in the bunker,
it's not on Earth.
It may not even be on Earth.
That's right.
That's right. Well, I don't think we're as far away as Alpha Centauri, but...
Well, we're on the way.
Okay.
This show was actually broadcast 5 years ago. Anyway, when I was on terrestrial radio, or land-based radio, if you prefer, over-the-air radio.
We all know what we're talking about.
Yes. I would make a point of telling people what my biases are. I'm an Orthodox Catholic, and that's how I view the world. I come at everything from that perspective.
Sure.
And I really wish, I don't know how many times I said that, I really wish that the Mansbridges of the world and the different reporters and anchors of the news media would admit their own bias.
See, this is where I think conservatives in Canada make a big mistake when they attack the CBC for being biased, and then they say, "Oh, we have to defund the CBC," or some other people say, we have to keep the CBC, but we have to have it better controlled. We don't like CBC bias. I think that's a big mistake. I think the CBC should be as biased as they want to be. I have no problem with it. I just have a problem with that being a government-owned and operated broadcasting.
If you're going to get rid of the CBC, you can't do it lock, stock, and barrel overnight. For one thing, when we do rating sweeps in radio to find out listenership numbers and all that sort of thing, it's a very flawed system to begin with. Yeah, they mail out a certain number of diaries. People are supposed to keep the diaries.
Right, we just did that.
Did you?
My wife and I, yes. Well, okay. My wife did it.
Okay.
She kept saying, "What did you watch on TV?" I go, "Well, nothing." I have to put something in. No, I didn't watch anything.
Don't lie.
I'm not laughing. We just got rid of it.
No,
sorry,
I said don't lie.
I'm taking away your thunder here.
Yes, but the point I'm making is...
We don't even have TV anymore.
No, and as a matter of fact, I don't either. Everything I want to watch is online.
Yeah. I
watch a ton of 5 to 10 minute videos from people I respect and people that drive me crazy. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that these diaries would go out, people would fill them out, and then send them back, and that's what we based how many people were listening. Now... They didn't include CBC because CBC had such a huge market share that it skewed the results. Because when you've got a budget of $1.6 billion a year, you cover the country like a blanket. Is it any wonder? Have you ever listened to, never mind the content, but listen to how slick CBC broadcasting is? They can have somebody in Vancouver, Mexico, and downtown Ottawa having a conversation, and you'd swear they're all in the same room, and yet they can't even see each other.
But we can do that.
Not like they can.
Well,
you ever take a look at the number, or listen at the end of a show to how many people go into putting that show together? When I was doing my show, guess how many people there was?
Yeah, you and your producer.
That's it, two people.
Right.
So
and we're doing this with two people. But, okay, you're right. But we could do... With a little bit more assistance,
well, here's what I would
suggest. A little bit more help with what we're doing here. We don't need. Listen. Okay. Note to government. Okay. Throw us $50,000.
Yes.
And we can do as good a job as the CBC.
No question.
Okay.
But here's what they should do, because I'm saying you shouldn't just chop it off and let it go, because they'd swallow the industry whole.
Okay. Well, sure.
Because they have such a huge market share. What you would do, rather than chop it off, is cut it up in little pieces. You wouldn't sell off everything all at once. You'd sell off a radio station here, a TV station there, and slowly whittle them down to their core mandate, which is to reach communities that cannot be reached any other way and just report the news.
Right. Well, If you want to call that their core mandate, I don't even care about mandate. No, core mandate, not core mandate, and I don't care.
Private.
This is my attitude. My attitude is I'm a very big believer in this, Nick. Privatize the CBC. Okay, sell it off, lock, stock, and barrel. I don't care whether you do it in pieces or one big chunk. I'm not interested in saving the Canadian media market.
No,
it's the media. Here's the thing: 99 times, most of the time. I was going to say 99 times out of 100. All of the time. Let's say all of the time. When the government has to step in to save an industry, it's always because the government has to save it from its original interference. Okay? If the government is not interfering with an industry and keeps its hands off, things work the way they work.
It's called
for better or for worse, yep. Okay? Change happens. It's not regulated. It's not controlled. And that's the way it should be. Okay? That's the way it should be, and that's the way it should be with the media in this country, newspapers. We have to go for a break, Nick.
Yep.
So I almost never know what to say when we're about to go for a break.
Well, here's what 13 years of radio taught me. You guys stay right there. We'll be right back after this with more on the Combat Zone. All right, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I'm Joseph. He's Nick. This is why I can't believe I just did that.
I gotta obviously put a cue card in front of you.
Oh man, I'm Nick. He's Joseph.
A mirror. We'll put a mirror up on the wall here in front of you
with my name tag on it.
Right, Nick.
That way I'll know who it is.
I'm Nick. No,
yes.
He's Nick.
No, don't confuse me.
You're Nick.
I'm having too much.
I'm Joe.
Too much of
what
the
do you
stuff
got in
already.
that glass of water there? It looks like a wine glass.
You know what?
It's a wine goblet with water in it. It's a water goblet.
It's not just water. I've gotten into lemon water.
Okay, lemon water.
It is. I squeeze about. I've got about a 1 gallon container that goes in the fridge. I put the juice of 4 lemons in it, and it's amazing. I love it. I love the stuff. It's a nice break from all the sweet stuff. So that has nothing to do with anything. Just a little bit on my own personal dietary habits. Okay, let's see.
AJ's talking about climate change.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. If you want to get into that.
Well, I'm not sure I want to get too much into climate change, but it's not so much climate change per se. Although let me just get this off. No, let me get this off my chest. Okay. I was reading some tweets recently by leaders of the conservative political parties here in Ontario and in Alberta and that. And, it's so frustrating. We've talked about this before, Nick, but my goodness gracious, can we have leaders that are going to lead? There is no consensus, and we're going to get into this a little bit about the corruption of the English language, okay? And this is how when we were talking about it for our listeners, when Nick and I were talking about this before the show, and we came up with this idea, we really should talk about the corruption of the English language. And the genesis of that discussion was the fact that people keep talking about this consensus amongst scientists that climate change, and notice how we've subtly changed from global warming to climate change. We don't talk about global warming now because that's been discredited, but we still are having the same conversation, but instead of global warming, it's about climate change, because it's hard to deny climate change because climate change is real. Nobody denies climate change, okay? And they go, you're a climate change denier. No, I am not a climate change denier. I just don't see the evidence that climate change, quote unquote, is caused by human activity. Certainly the climate change that's happened in the last 4.5 billion years, or however long people say the Earth has been around, okay, has not been caused by human activity, right? So, and I'm sorry, but, carbon dioxide is not pollution.
Nope.
But I have to listen to conservative frontbenchers, okay, leading politicians in the federal Conservative Party in Canada talk about pollution, talk about carbon dioxide as pollution. And then I have to hear, how in Ontario we have to come up, this is a conservative government, talking about having to come up with a plan to combat climate change. And then the leader of the Conservative Party Jason Kenney in Alberta tweeting about how it's clear evidence that climate change is man-made, or man has an effect on climate change. And here's the thing, okay, as you know, Nick, I have been working over the course of my life in conservative politics. So many of the people that are taking these positions, I've sat and broken bread with them. I've had beers with them, the ones that drink. Okay, I mean, we've been friends over the years. Okay, I know that these guys don't believe in man-made climate change, and not so much that they don't believe in it, but that their position is it hasn't been proven. And there is no scientific consensus. And that's where we started getting this whole thing about the corruption of the English language. And I have a few words here we could talk about. But,
sure.
But the one to start with is this word consensus, okay? And now, I'm making these numbers up because I don't recall exactly what the numbers are to the claim. Maybe some of you do. And by the way, if you want to call in, our number to call toll-free anywhere in North America is 844-415-2115. Or if you want to participate in our live chat, which is usually very active, click on the chat bubble in the player online. And if you have to sign in, log in, or register, it's free. It costs you nothing. And the reason you register is to make sure you're actually a human being, not a robot. There. I didn't even have to rehearse that. I just, practiced that. So where were we? So I'm making these numbers up, okay, Nick?
Not the phone number.
I'm not making the phone number up. 844-415-2115. How many times have you heard, 68%, two-thirds of climate scientists, or two-thirds of the world's scientists, we have a consensus. Two-thirds of the world's scientists believe in man-made climate change or man-made global warming or whatever the phrase is. And I'm going, okay, well, that's interesting. First of all, I don't know how you come up with two-thirds or three-quarters or nine-tenths in that respect. But however you come up with it, excuse me, guys, I'm talking too much without getting a sip of my tea here. But my back is up on this stuff. You can tell I'm a little passionate about it. It's not a consensus. Consensus means that everybody agrees, or either agrees with it or agrees to go along with it. Okay? So when you have 10% dissension, you don't have a consensus. So it's the words have meaning. And there is no consensus, even among the people who cite these studies, so-called surveys, okay? Take them at face value. Let's agree for the sake of argument that the surveys have been done methodologically properly, that they reflect accurately whatever it is that you're trying to survey. It's still not a consensus. So stop calling it a consensus.
The thing that drives me crazy about all this, consensus or not, like Albert Einstein's very famous for saying it doesn't take a consensus to defeat one of my theories, it takes one fact. Consensus is not how science is done anyway. There was a time when the whole world, everybody thought that the world was flat, and all the maps at the edges had sayings like, beyond here be dragons, and the water just rolled off the edge of the map and disappeared into some abyss. Well, it didn't take Galileo very long to show that wasn't true, and he did it with a very simple trick. He said, when you see a ship come into harbor, what's the first part that you see? Well, the top of the mast. And he took a pin, and he stuck it in an orange or an apple or something like that. He said, pretend the pin is the tip of a mast. And he pointed it away from the observers, and then he slowly rolled the apple in his hands. And the very first thing they saw was the tip of the mast, of the top of the pin. He said, that proves, without a shadow of a doubt, the Earth is round. Now, it didn't take it destroyed any consensus. It completely rewrote the history books. It completely rewrote science as they knew it in those times. So, it's really very simple. You don't do science by consensus. And you hear, well, it's all peer-reviewed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If somebody can say, look, this doesn't work because of this simple fact, then the theory is defeated.
Well, do you remember ClimateGate?
Yes, East Anguilla.
Okay, so here's the thing about ClimateGate. All of those studies were peer-reviewed. Now, if you're listening to this out there, please get yourself a pen and write this down. This is the most important thing that you have heard. You've heard a lot of important things on this show. This is the most important thing that you will have learned. Okay? I hope everybody's ready. Here we go. Peer reviews of scientific papers only review the conclusions based on the data that's reported in the paper that's being reviewed. What they don't review is the data itself. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why those particular studies that led to ClimateGate got by, was because the conclusions of the study were consistent with the data that was presented in the study. But the data was all corrupted. But a peer review will never catch that, because they never check the authenticity of the data.
So it goes back to the computer saying garbage in, garbage out.
Essentially, that's exactly what it is. So if I come up with a study and I completely invent the data, and I report the study, I put it all in, and then I come with my conclusions, and my data supports the conclusions, and then I give it over to a peer review. Unless it's obviously kooky, a peer review is not going to catch that. They're going to look at them and go, okay, well, that looks fine, that looks fine, that looks fine. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So the problem is you either have to do an audit of the data, or you have to try to replicate the data.
Right.
And this is very important in the scientific method. Replication of whatever the experiment is, in order to get data that's independent of the original research, is very important. If you come up with a scientific theory that the experiment cannot be replicated, then that's not a proper scientific theory.
Yeah, it's discarded.
Okay? So you have to be, and here's the other thing, okay? Promise, this is such important stuff for people to understand. The purpose of a scientific experiment is not to prove that the theory is correct. When you have a theory and you design an experiment around the theory, which, by the way, most of which is missing in this whole thing about global warming and man-made climate change, okay? There is you have a theory, but they haven't actually designed any experiments to test the theory. And here's the thing about the experiment to test the theory, and this is the basic scientific method, Nick, is that the experiment is always designed to disprove the theory. You never design an experiment in the scientific method to prove that your theory is right. Because you can come up with, there's a word for this. It's called, it's an epistemological problem, okay? And it relates back to what you said about Einstein saying you only have to prove once, right?
Right.
I could prove 1,000 times. If you want me to prove that gravity is real, I'll come up with an experiment, and I promise you, every time I do that experiment, gravity will be proven to be real. If you want to come up with an experiment that would disprove gravity, okay, that's the experiment that I want. That's the real scientific experiment. So scientific experimentation is never about proving a theory correct. It's about proving a theory incorrect. Now, what people mistake is they mistake all of these guys wandering around with test tubes and labs and lab coats and clipboards and computers and tablets and stuff like that, looking very clean and neat and official, as science. This is science. Look, it's a laboratory. Not necessarily. A laboratory is just a laboratory. Okay? Test tubes and all of these things and Bunsen burners and all. Well, they're just Bunsen burners and test tubes, pieces of glass, okay? Science is not, when people talk about science, they mistakenly they mistake the accoutrements of scientific methods, that is to say the lab coats and all of the jargon and all that stuff, and they go, well, it must be scientific. But it's nothing to do with it. Science, the scientific method is very, very specific. And there's very little true science in the whole argument about climate change.
And what there isn't necessarily in support. I've seen, I've heard conversations and read things, everything from the hockey stick to the East Anguilla email scandal. There's just so much distrust. But there's this. We're still talking about the destruction of the English language or the corruption of it. But
we're getting there anyway, aren't we?
Well, we're supposed to be talking about that. But there is another side effect of this that I think is going to hit people like a sledgehammer. The day that the masses wake up and realize that they've been lied to on a global scale, you think people have trouble finding credible sources now. This is going to do huge damage to the scientific community because if we can't trust them on something like this, what can we trust them on?
Well, I guess so, Nick. But I'm a little more easygoing and a little more charitable, I think, towards people than that. I don't think that. I'm not going to say I'd be foolish to say that it's somebody's purposely trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes in order to achieve this, that, or the other thing. Maybe there are people like that, but I think that the vast majority of those people who are out there who are, beating the drums about man-made climate change and all this stuff, I think that they're sincere in their belief. They're wrong, but they're sincere. And this is the tragedy of it.
But if you go back to the East Anguilla scandal, okay, because you're right. I'm not saying first of all, I think there's going to be a huge backlash. But it's not, and maybe it'll catch some people that's unintended. Because every time people have, for lack of a better phrase, knee-jerk reactions, there's always collateral damage. But when you look at places like the University of East Anguilla, well, world has a world reputation, highly respected scientific university. When they come out and get caught fudging the numbers, that's going to have an impact. And it's not just them. There's a lot of different organizations out there that are going to do tremendous damage to the scientific community. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people out there who sincerely want to do the right thing. They sincerely think that we're the problem. And it's not because they're hard-hearted and socialist and want to destroy everything. They have been sold a bill of goods that says we are going to destroy the planet if we don't do X, Y, Z, and they believe it.
Right. And the tragedy of all of this, Nick? The tragedy of all this is, think of what this is doing to people and their emotional well-being, especially younger people who are being told in school day in and day out that the planet is on the verge of irreversible damage. That, imagine being an 8 or a 9 or a 10-year-old kid and you're seeing and you're hearing this stuff in school that 50 years from now the planet is going to burn up. People are going to be dying from... It's the emotional damage that's inflicted, harm that's being inflicted on kids these days in the schools is unimaginable. It's unspeakable.
Well,
and I can't. And here's a word, okay? Enormity. Enormity does not mean really, really big. It means incredibly intense evil. That's what enormity actually means. The enormity of what's being done in the schools today to our youth, to our kids.
And it's just not. It's not just in global warming either.
It's unspeakable.
Well, it's like the term decimate. Somebody will say that I was decimated, so you're reduced by 1/10. Because to be decimated is to be reduced by 1/10. And my son, it drives my son crazy every time somebody uses that. He just goes out of his mind because that is not. If you want to say that you've been totally destroyed, if you want to say that you've been wiped out, if you want to say that the damage is, extreme, okay, fine. But don't tell me you've been decimated because that makes no logistical sense.
Although it'll probably be a plus if we start talking about how the human race is going to be decimated from global warming and climate change.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Because you're going, that's not so bad.
Context is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, context is everything.
And there's another...
Well, I shouldn't... Okay, sorry, Nick. Okay, guys, don't start writing in and complaining, okay? I'm not saying that 10% of the world's population dying is a good thing or acceptable, okay? No. Please, guys, okay? Don't accuse me of that. It's not true.
I know Joseph better than that. He thinks it's only about 5% that would be a good thing.
Okay, don't write in and say Nick thinks that, okay? We're just joking around here, guys.
We're having some fun. Oh, speaking of fun, when we're getting close to the top of the hour. And when we get back, I don't want to start this now, but I think we've hit a new, well, it depends on how you look at it, high or low in the world of political correctness.
Political correctness gone crazy.
Oh, it's insane. Like every time you turn around and you think, and I'm not going to tell you what we're talking about till after the break.
Well, no, I'm going to give a teaser, okay? Because if anyone out there has heard about this, okay, you have to get on and tweet about it, or call your friends or post it on Facebook or whatever, okay? Because we're going to be talking about banning Baby It's Cold Outside.
I can't.
Okay, it's the banning and all of this stuff. So, okay, let's not get into it now,
okay.
Nick. Okay.
I've done a little research on this topic.
So we're going to talk about that at the top of the hour in the second or in the third segment or the second hour. Okay, so just bear that in mind because we'll have a little fun with that.
But let's stay with this perversion of the English language for just the last few minutes.
Do you want more words?
Yeah. What else you got?
Okay, so here's a couple of more. Okay, fortuitous. Fortuitous, people think means
fortunate.
Okay. Oh, that's fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fortuitous.
Yeah.
No, fortuitous actually means coincidental.
Really?
Absolutely.
Because there's a line in the movie Muppet Treasure Island where they're at the island and Professor Honeydew, Beaker, and Rizzo the Rat, about 3 or 4 characters get tied to the mast. And they're all freaking out because the pirates have taken over the ship. And Beaker looks at Honeydew. Professor Honeydew looks at Beaker and says, "It's most fortuitous. Our weapons were not loaded, Beaker." And then Rizzo goes, "Yeah, because somebody might have get shot."
Right. I think they were making a mistake.
Obviously, and I can't imagine them making a mistake in Muppet Treasure Island, the best Muppet movie ever made.
Fulsome.
Folsom?
Fulsome. Fulsome.
Then it's not a prison.
No. You're a Johnny Cash fan.
Well, I know the song. I don't know if I'm a Johnny Cash fan, but I know the song.
Okay, fulsome does not mean full. Or complete or abundant. Okay, right. Fulsome actually means insincere. Insincere, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Praise.
Oh.
Insincere praise. If you praise me fulsomely, that's not a good thing.
There's a term we use for that today.
I don't know.
Oh, come on. When somebody gives you praise they don't mean. Sarcasm? Is it sarcasm? Sarcastic?
Disingenuous.
There you go. That's
disingenuous.
Yes,
right.
Disingenuous.
Here's one of my favorite. Luxuriant.
You would think comfortable.
Luxuriant does not mean luxurious. Luxuriant means abundant. So a luxuriant garden is a garden that's lush with plant life and flowers, etc. Okay? It's not luxurious. It has nothing to do with luxury whatsoever. Here's one of my favorites that you hear all the time. Irregardless. Okay, guys, listen now. You heard it here first. You're learning all these lovely things, right? Irregardless. Irregardless is a double negative, okay? If you say irregardless, it means that you should be regarding it. There actually is no such word as irregardless. It's regardless. Okay, so regardless of this.
Yeah,
okay?
Because that just means let's set that aside. That's what regardless means. Let's not worry about that right now.
Regardless of that.
Right.
Another
one is, I would imagine.
I decided to drive in the snowstorm regardless. I decided not to get snow tires regardless of the fact that I live in Ottawa and there's snow in the wintertime.
Now, what does that mean about the word irrespective?
Irrespective is very similar to regardless.
That's what I thought.
So you can use them pretty interchangeably. But irregardless would be like saying irrespective. Okay? Because regardless, you either regard something, you either do something with regard to it,
right,
or you do it irregardless of it. But you don't do it, or you do it
regardless.
I just made the same mistake, right?
I know.
You either do it with regard to it, or regardless of it.
Now
you don't do something. Irregardless is not even a real word.
Well, see, this is what Like, I'm no Shakespeare by any stretch.
Oh, okay.
I know it's hard to believe, but one of the things, you want to talk about pet peeves. The first time I noticed a decline in the English language, I was driving a tractor trailer through Brooklyn, New York. And I remember it because it jumped up right off the sign at me. I'm driving along looking for an address, and there are auto repair shops lining the streets. And there was one that had...
You must have been on Utica Avenue.
Where was I?
Through Brooklyn.
I was going to Snow Fresh Foods, but I can't remember what address it was. Who cares?
That's like the world capital of collision centers and car repair places.
Believe me, there was a million of them.
Right.
Anyway,
and storefront Bible and storefront churches.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of those. I might have been on
Utica.
Astoria.
Astoria. Okay, Astoria. Yeah.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I'm driving along, and all of a sudden, this word jumped right off the sign and jumped into my face. In a philosophical sense, it said we repair transmissions.
Figurative sense.
What's that?
Figuratively.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. But it said we repair transmissions. They spelled transmissions with an E, and I did a double take. I said, "What? That's not right." And then all of a sudden, everywhere I looked, if you want to drive yourself nuts, go on Kijiji, go on any of these online for sale places, eBay. Look at the writing. It is absolutely... Now, some of it is laziness. They just don't proofread. They don't go back and correct their texts, which I have been becoming more and more fanatical about. I'll sometimes go back. If I post something on Facebook, I'll go back 4 or 5 times if I see an error. Now, I still make some, but I'm honestly going back and correcting my English so it looks intelligent, even if I'm not. Because I've had experiences where you post something in haste, you don't correct it, and you look like a flaming idiot, which is pretty much standard for me anyway. But when you look at this stuff and you think, who wrote this? Because since you don't have a face to look at, the only thing you have for a good first impression are the words that people use. And it makes me lose my mind. It's like when my wife uses the word pass the butt when she's talking about butter. Or pass the marge. We don't eat margarine anymore, but when she did, it drove me nuts. The word's not marge, it's margarine. And then she would laugh and say, be glad I don't ask you to pass the butt. It's just little things, it just drive me nuts.
Back in the combat zone. I am Joe. He is Nick. And notice how I got that right.
I'm proud of you, Joseph, because I didn't.
I am Joe, and he is Nick. Got that, Nick?
It sounds like
you
a song.
are Nick,
I am Joe, and
Joe.
He is Nick. Doo-da, doo-da. I am Joe, and he is Nick. And I still got it wrong.
That's pretty good. I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah.
Too much lemon in your water there, Nick.
Obviously, either that or not enough.
Too much lemon in your water. Okay, so so guys, here we go. Fasten your seatbelts. It's stupid, not necessarily politicians. I tried to say that properly, but
yes, but you know something? Anybody can fit this category.
Okay, go for it, Nick. You know all about this. You set this up.
First of all, I couldn't believe my ears when I first heard about this. For those of you who don't know, there's an old song out there, and I grew up listening to this song and never thought of anything about it. It's called "Oh Baby, It's Cold Outside." And it was written in 1944. And it's the version that Joseph found is part of a movie. I'm not so sure whether it was actually originally part of a movie or they made the movie around a song. Either way, it's an old song. It's
okay, so let's play the clip.
Okay, here's the song.
Okay, well, there's a little bit of dialogue before the song.
Okay.
And this is actually from the movie. So
okay.
Here we go. We'll just play this clip. Okay, guys?
You know, for an evening that started out so badly, it has definite possibilities. No. Before you drink, you must always say, salud.
Salud.
You know,
Salud.
Salud.
You know, on second thought,
Yes?
I really can't stay.
Baby, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
Baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has been
Hoping that you drop
so
in.
very nice.
I'll hold your hands. They're just like
My
ice.
mother will start to worry.
Beautiful. What's your
My
hurry?
father will be pacing the floor.
Listen to the fireplace
So
roar.
really, I'd better scurry.
Beautiful, please don't
Well,
hurry.
maybe just a half a drink more.
Put some records on while I pour.
The neighbors might
But
think.
baby, it's bad out there.
Say, what's in this
No
drink?
cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew how
Your eyes are like stars
to
right
break
now.
this spell.
I'll take your hat. Your hair looks
I
swell.
ought to say no,
Mind
sir.
if I move in closer?
At least I'm gonna say that I tried.
What's the sense of hurting my pride?
I really can't
Oh,
stay.
baby, don't hold out, baby.
Oh, but it's cold outside. I simply must go.
Baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is
But
no.
baby, it's cold outside.
The welcome has
How
been
lucky that you dropped
so
in.
nice and warm.
Look out the window at that storm.
My sister will be
Gosh, your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there at the door.
Waves upon a tropical
My
shore.
maiden aunt's mind is vicious.
Gosh, your lips are delicious.
Or maybe just a cigarette more.
Never such a blizzard before.
I've got to get
But
home.
baby, you'd freeze out there.
Say, lend me a coat.
It's up to your knees out there.
You've really been
I
grand.
thrill when you touch my
But
hand.
don't you see?
How can you do this thing to
There's
me?
bound to be talk tomorrow.
Think of my lifelong
At
sorrow.
least there will be plenty implied.
If you got pneumonia and
I
die,
really can't
get
stay.
over that old doubt, baby.
Ah, but it's cold outside.
So there it is, Nick.
That's the hugely offensive song that a radio station, I believe it was in Cleveland, Ohio, decided was, because of pressure by the Me Too movement, was out of step with modern sensibilities. Was just too, I can't even think of the right phrase, but they decided they couldn't play this song because the girl was trying to leave and the guy was trying to keep her from leaving. And we can't have that. Well, it's funny because, first of all, it's a very innocent song. By today's standards, I went on to Google, and where is my little list? I cannot read you. Oh, don't tell me I killed it. Oh, here it is. Okay. I cannot read you. I'll have to bleep out most of this, but here's just one example. This is number 8 of the all-time dirtiest rap or hip-hop songs. This is what our kids are listening to today. Now, remember what they don't want you to listen to because it enforces the rape culture. Okay? That's what Me Too's all upset about. So let me bleep this out. This is from a guy called Killa Cam. Anyway, let's see. Here's some of his lyrics. Whips on my fists, houses on my wrist, your budget on my neck, your spouse on my bleep, posters on the wall, posted on my bleep, bleep in her mouth. I tell her I'm getting bleep, bleep, get 'em girls. Now, each one of those bleeps is such a disgusting word that even online I can't use it. I wouldn't use this kind of language anyway. But contrast that to what you just heard. They won't touch this, but they'll go after a song written in 1944 with Ricardo Montalban. Are you serious? And this is the kind of stuff, just give me one more example, okay? And again, I got to do a lot of bleeping here. This is from the Miami rapper, let's see, who are you? Danny Brown, okay? Or I can rub it on your bleep and just play with your neck and let me slide my finger in that bleep just to check. Ain't about who's spending the most money, because it's about who bleep the best. I'm a high bleep who a freak baby when it comes to... Okay, so it's just outrageous they would ban this song from 1944, which is...
Okay, but we're defying the ban here. And just to make
absolutely.
Just to make sure that everybody understands that we are equal opportunity offenders, alleged offenders, we've decided, Nick and I, that we want to start the Me Too 2 movement. Okay, he's flashing me 3. Well, we did, but I thought Me Too 2 sounded a little more...
Oh, Me Too 2, okay.
Me Too 2. Not to be concerned with Me Too 2.
Neither one of us would look good in a tutu, by the way.
No, well, I don't know about you, Nick, but I definitely would not.
No, it would have to be
okay, can we change the subject now? This is really...
Bleep, wrong.
Bleep.
Bleep, yeah, you got it.
Okay, no, listen. This is the thing about the Baby It's Cold Outside ban, okay? And it's not just the one radio station. I think there's a number of these radio stations now that are doing it. You probably have a list there. But before you do that, Nick, I just want to offend a few more people because the same song is played in the same movie. And the guy is trying to leave and the woman is trying to keep him. And in case you were thinking that we just made that up, hang on, guys. Here we go.
Song.
Bear with us.
I really can't
But
stay.
baby, it's cold outside.
I've got to go away.
Baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has
Been hoping that you'd drop
so
in.
very nice.
I'll hold your hands. They're just like
My
ice.
mother will start to worry.
Beautiful, what's your
And
hurry?
father will be pacing the floor.
Listen to the fireplace
So
roar.
really I'd better scurry.
Beautiful, please don't hurry.
Maybe just a little drink more.
Put some records on while I pull.
The neighbors might
But baby,
think.
it's bad out there.
Say what's in this
No
drink.
cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew
Your
how
eyes are like stars
to
right
break
now.
the spell.
I'll take your hat. Your hair looks
I ought to say no, no,
Mind if I
senor.
move in
At
close?
least I'm going to say that I tried.
What's the sense of hurting my
really
pride?
can't
Oh,
stay.
baby, don't hold out,
Oh,
baby.
but it's cold outside. You simply must go.
Baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is
But
no.
baby, it's cold outside.
The greeting has been
Lucky that I dropped
so
in.
nice and warm.
Look out the window at that
Your
store.
sister will be suspicious.
Gosh, your lips look
Your
delicious.
brother will be there at the door.
Waves upon a tropical shore.
Your maiden aunt's mind is vicious.
Gosh, your lips are delicious.
Maybe just a cigarette
Never
more.
such a blizzard before.
You've got to go
But
home.
baby, I'd freeze out there.
I'll lend you my
It's
comb.
up to my knees out there.
You've really been grand,
Thrill when you touch my...
but don't you see?
How can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be talk tomorrow.
Think of your lifelong
At least there will be plenty
If I
implied.
caught pneumonia and died,
really can't
get
stay.
over that old out,
Oh,
baby.
but it's cold outside.
Now, you're probably wondering why we've played both of those clips in their entirety. Well, the reason was we wanted you to understand the first clip. We wanted you to understand what the controversy was all about, or the non-controversy, okay, and how silly it was. But because we believe in gender equality here, not only did we have to reverse the roles, and by the way, we didn't actually reverse them. That was actually part of the movie.
Right, we didn't do that on
So
purpose.
they did that back in 1943 or 44 or whatever year that was that they made the movie. But we felt that we had to give equal time to the woman who was not allowing the man to leave. And hence our desire to start the Me Too movement.
I'm telling you
Because
this.
I cannot believe But we may be Me Too too, but we are definitely in favor of gender equality.
Well, the whole point of this is, for me, it's the hypocrisy. I mean, even without the second part of the song, which does a wonderful job of balancing off the first, because it's clear it's not all one way. That it's a very simple, light song. There's a little bit of teasing in it, a little bit of romance, that kind of stuff. What's wrong with that? You know, he hasn't got her tied to a chair with a gun to her head, and she doesn't reciprocate. So what's the problem? You know, when you look at the music today and the absolute filth that flows out of radio stations.
Right, and outright violence of some of this, and the promotion of violence against women.
Well, here's what AJ has to say about
some of these wildly popular music pieces and songs. And by the way, guys, I've heard these songs. Nick and I were listening to a few of them beforehand, and I got to tell you, you know what? The beauty of doing this online as opposed to on terrestrial radio is that we can do whatever we want. Right. We're not regulated. So when we say we're not going to play this stuff, it's because it's really offensive, and it really does promote disrespect and violence against women.
Well, here, AJ, one of the people in the chat room, has this to say, and I just thought I'd share it with the listeners. He says there's tons of that stuff out there. For example, check out Chris Brown's song Loyal from 2014. If you can move past the fact this guy is also a confirmed woman abuser, the song essentially suggests that women are nothing but gold diggers who will sleep with anyone who has money. Now, look, if you're going to ban Oh Baby It's Cold Outside, how does 9/10 of the rap stuff and the hip-hop stuff make it out of the studio?
Well, I guess what I would say to that, Nick, is, in fairness, I don't think that this hip-hop rap stuff that's very violent against women, I don't think it gets to mainstream radio stations. It may not even be played on terrestrial radio stations at all, but okay, you're going to jump in. Let me presume that I know what you're going to say here.
All right.
And that is that I don't hear the Me Too movement making a big stink or a big deal. I don't hear Hollywood protesting against these songs.
Okay, so if the Me Too movement was legitimate, if it actually cared about dealing with, let's call it, domestic violence, regardless of the gender involved, if it really just cared about those things, then they would be protesting the record producers, or I'm using the term record producers in the generic sense because there's not many people making records anymore. It's all digital now. But for the people who produce this stuff, they would be picketing, they would be screaming, they would be hollering to have the garbage that's being put out as modern pop music taken off the air. That way, at least they would have a little bit of credibility when they decided to go after a song like "Oh Baby It's Cold Out There." But there's none of that. There's no balance. It's all, oh well, we can't have a 1940s love song that's lighthearted and kind of fun and has a cute tune, because it's. To me, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's an attack against the relationship between a man and a woman in a very healthy way. Like they're flirting with each other is what they're doing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way we're wired as human beings.
Okay.
Enough of my rant.
Well, maybe I should have not played the extra from stupid. We keep calling it stupid politicians. It was stupid non-politicians. I tried to say that in a humorous way, and I couldn't get it out earlier.
We could just call it the stupid segment.
We'll just call it the stupid segment.
Yeah.
Stupid is what stupid does.
And this is stupid.
This is
world-class stupid.
It's pretty stupid. Now, let's talk for a few minutes about the war on Christmas, okay?
You read my mind.
I read your mind again, Nick.
It doesn't take long, does it?
Well, Nick, you are an open book.
With about 3 pages.
Right. Now, if only we could get you to get these names straight. I'm Joe, you're Nick.
I knew that.
I know.
It's just spitting it out sometimes ain't easy.
So I'm driving down the road this afternoon or this evening to our secret location here in Bunker B, and I'm listening to a radio station from the United States, which we could pick up here, terrestrial radio. I know I should have been listening online, but what the heck. So I'm listening to WABC, and I like to listen to WABC because in the evenings sometimes the atmosphere conditions are just right that we can get it here 300, 400 miles away.
Is that in New York City?
It's New York City. Yep.
770.
770,
yep.
Right. And on your AM.
That's 10 years of driving truck taught me that much.
Yeah. So I'm listening to this, and the first thing I hear is a commercial for, a holiday music concert. I believe it was the New York Pops Orchestra, sometime close to Christmas time, and they're doing their annual holiday music extravaganza and inviting people to come to it. And then, okay, I've heard this stuff. I don't know why they don't call it Christmas concert, because it's a Christmas concert. I just don't understand why Christians don't want to be Christian around Christmas time. To me, it doesn't compute, but there it is. But anyway, immediately after that commercial, I'm listening to a car commercial. Now, I don't remember if it was for Mazda or it was for Toyota or whatever, matter. Nissan. It was one of those companies. A dealership, I should say. It was a dealership for one of the and they start talking about their inspiration season sale. We're heading into the inspiration season.
And now what season would that be?
Now that is, clearly it's the snow season.
Clearly. That's because that's the only thing going on at that time of year.
Well, when I heard this, I thought, okay, I had never heard that term before, and it's so strange to hear it. And this is my question, okay? Has the war against Christmas finally been won by the left? I was with a friend of mine, by the way, who's a very committed Christian, who wished somebody a happy holiday.
What?
And
I think I know who that is. I'm surprised.
And I said to this person, I turned to the person who he wished happy holiday to, and I said, I don't know why he just said that. Merry Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy Christmas. Which is, again, it's funny coming from me because, I wear that little beanie on my head. And,
well, the thing...
Okay, don't write to us, guys, okay? It's not a beanie. It's a yarmulke or kippah or whatever. I'm wearing it. I wear it. I'm the real McCoy. Ski.
Oh, you're
okay. Yeah,
you're
okay.
One of those Polish Jews?
Now people are going to write to us because of that, and they go, "Oh, you're anti-Semitic and all that stuff."
Yeah.
Okay, really? Come on.
Good luck with that. But the thing that bothers me the most is because in a way, I understand why members of my community, why the Christian community, they don't want to appear to be forceful. It's a peaceful time of year.
Oh,
no.
On,
I don't say I agree with it. Okay, I don't agree with that at all. I think this time of year you should be proud of being a Christian, and when someone comes up to you, you stick your hand out and say, Merry Christmas.
Well, nobody should be offended by this. I'm not offended by it.
How many?
Why should you? But you shouldn't be afraid of offending people. Here's the thing, okay? If I have the right as a Jew to say to people, Happy Hanukkah, and if you get offended by that, you're doing something wrong because you're being offended by me being, multicultural or whatever.
It's mine.
Well, is there no place in a multicultural, pluralistic society that we all celebrate, and we genuflect before the altar of multiculturalism, okay, and all that stuff? And if you guys saw us in a webcam right now, you'd see I'm genuflecting here.
He's actually trying to take off.
Okay, that's right. I'm waving my arms. No, but seriously, is there really no place in a allegedly multicultural society for Christian culture or Judeo-Christian culture?
Well,
but
it is the founding culture of our society.
Well, I don't understand, and I don't understand why Christians are not a lot more. Let's not say aggressive. Let's say assertive about this.
Yeah, and it's because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to offend anybody.
Well, I have some advice for you Christians.
Yeah.
A little more onward Christian soldiers and a little less turn the other cheek would be a welcome thing in our society for many of us.
Well, there's a time and place for both of those. At Christmas time, when we're celebrating I won't say it's the heart of our faith, but it's a very big part of our faith, then why would you ever make excuses for that? Why would you ever worry about what somebody else thinks about your core beliefs? This is one of the acid tests I use when I'm talking to somebody to find out what is their self-esteem like? What is their, how secure are they in who they are? If they worry too much about what... Now, we all have a little... Nobody wants to be intentionally offensive. At least, certainly I don't. I'm not afraid of causing offense if people don't understand where I'm coming from. I don't apologize for that. I will try to make them understand why I didn't intend any offense, but I'm not going to back down. But too many people will look at that and say, oh, well, I just didn't want to offend anybody. And I hear it over and over and over. And I said, how? I've said hundreds of times, how is saying Merry Christmas offensive? I know I'll bet you, and I'm not doing this, I know more than one person who is of the Jewish faith. And none of them have ever said to me this time of year, I find your salutation of Merry Christmas offensive. None of them.
Yeah, it's funny because what you're saying actually is true. Well, of course, I'm not going to question whether it's true or not, but the point I think that you're making is that there really isn't a whole lot of people out there who are offended by you saying Merry Christmas, even if they're not Christian. And here's somebody, as somebody who's Jewish, I will wish people Merry Christmas. It's Christmas time. I have actually admonished people who say to me, they'll say to me, Happy Holidays. And I'll say, no, it's Christmas. Merry Christmas. You can say Merry Christmas to people. They're not going to get offended.
Right.
In a real sense, I don't really think that there are that many people out there who are offended, if any. I've never come across a person who was offended by somebody saying Merry Christmas, okay?
Real.
I think it's the do-gooders and bureaucrats and the denizens of liberal mythology or whatever you want to call them that they're out there beating the drum saying we can't offend people, but I think it's all invented.
If you look at this on a broader scope, not just at Christmas time, but I believe there is a subtle, slow, steady attack on Christianity and religious people who are not afraid to wear what they believe on their sleeve, to put them to the sidelines. And you see it in Quebec where there was a bill about you can't wear... you can't wear a little crucifix on your blouse or your jacket if you are working for the civil service. Some airlines ban that, whether it be whatever Jewish equivalent to a crucifix would be, a menorah or something along that line. There's all kinds of different things that are disallowed because they are expressions of religious belief. Now, I personally have no problem if I see somebody wearing something. Let's take somebody who's a Sikh and they're wearing their turban. It's a part of their faith. Okay, I'm not going to say, hey, you take that off, unless they want to join an organization like the RCMP, because the RCMP uniform was around before Sikhs wanted to become members of the RCMP, unless they want to ride motorcycles and the rest of us have to wear helmets and they get a pass. Okay, those are exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, I have no problem with people who, let's say, they don't shave for whatever reason. Their hair is a big part of their religion. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. So why should what I believe... And right this time of year, we're celebrating the birth of a tiny little baby. What's so offensive about that?
Well, the point is there is nothing offensive about it. And again, I say again, I think this is an invented problem, Nick. I don't think it's real. Look, let's go for our third break. We'll be back in a minute.
Welcome back to the chat room, folks. I'm Nick. He's Joe, and I got it right. We've been talking about a wide range of things, this evening. But one of the things I think we really need to get to is this UN Migrant Compact. Now, I will admit I don't know as much about it as Joseph does. But my attitude out of it is, if it comes out of New York or Brussels with the UN stamp on it, it's got to be bad. I don't like the UN. I don't trust the UN, and I don't think they should have anything to do with helping us decide how many people we should take across our borders as immigrants or refugees or any of that. Those are Canadian decisions meant for the Canadian people to make through their parliamentarians, not through Brussels or New York. That is not what I'm interested in. I don't mind having, we need immigration. I don't mind helping refugees when it's necessary, although even in that case, it's kind of hard to define what a refugee is these days because, you know, it's not easy to get to Canada as a refugee. But anyway, that's set aside. So I am, at the moment, unless Joseph does an amazing job of changing my mind, I am dead set against this, and I think this is something that should be shot down and sent back to Brussels full of bullet holes.
Okay, well, Nick, you know, I hate defending the United Nations, so let's make sure that everybody understands right from the word go that I am not defending them, okay? I think the United Nations as an institution ought to be burned to the ground. Again, I've said this over and over again in this episode, do not write in. I'm speaking figuratively, not literally. And I'm assuming that our listeners are intelligent enough to know that this is not meant as a green light to go to the United Nations building in Manhattan and set fire to it. Having said that, okay, it's UN, not EU, so it's New York, not Brussels. And there are a few criticisms that I've heard about this, from conservative politicians in this country. And it's a little frustrating, Nick, because I think it's important that our people understand what this is. First of all, I don't agree with us signing on to this. I think it's useless, and it is. I'll explain to you why it's a pointless, useless document to begin with. Okay, so if you're not going to do things, then don't sign on to the treaty that says you're going to do things. Okay, this is really just a basic statement of principles that has been negotiated that a number of countries are signing on to. And you know, one of the things that people are complaining about or they're worried about is that this is going to force us to take more people in, more refugees and more migrants. First of all, the document doesn't deal with refugees at all. It deals with migrants, okay, who are people who are immigrating from one country to another for whatever reason. So it's not refugees in the sense of the legal definition of the term refugee. So let's just put that out of the way right now, okay? The second thing is whether or not this is actually going to be binding on us, or it ties our hands, or it forces us to accept anything. And the answer categorically to that is it doesn't. In fact, paragraph 7 of the protocol actually says quite explicitly, and you know, I'll quote it for you if you want. Let me just look it up here and make the print bigger because of my poor eyesight. The Global Compact presents, I'm quoting now, a non-legally binding cooperative framework that builds on the commitments agreed to by member states in the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants. Okay? It's not a legally binding document. Now, none of these treaties or declarations or anything like that are ever really domestically legally binding. And I know because I've been involved in some court cases where we actually tried to get the government of Canada to do certain things on the education file that in terms of promoting true choice in education, using some of the treaties that the Canadian government had signed that we felt were supportive of what we wanted to achieve. And we were told, no, that these treaties have no actual legal binding effect in Canada. Okay. So, but this one actually does, it says explicitly. Sorry, go on, Nick.
The thing that troubles me, because okay, that's fine. It's an unbinding agreement. But what troubles me is the current government has no appetite to treat this in any other fashion than as if it was binding. They will build policy around this. They will make this the law of the land. They will do everything they can to implement this. They do not care what Canadians think about immigration. They have shown nothing. Show me something in the past that tells you that they are concerned about the levels of immigration, the countries that these people are coming from, what their motives for getting into the country are, who they are, and the documentation that they bring. There's none of that. None of it. So why would I trust them with this non-binding document to say, well, that's nice, but we'll manage your own affairs, thank you very much, when it doesn't go Canada's way, when it's not in the Canadian best interest? I don't trust them as far as I can throw them, and I'm not all that strong.
Okay, well, I don't, again, I'm not defending the United Nations. I'm not defending the document. I'm not defending the government here in Canada. I wouldn't sign on to this, but I wouldn't, if I chose not to sign on to it, I wouldn't sign on to it because it's a worthless document. Okay, because in fact it doesn't do any of the. It doesn't even imply doing any of the things. It doesn't talk about numbers. It doesn't say you have to do this or anything like that. And again, when it comes to national sovereignty, and just in terms of the document itself, okay, paragraph 15 actually spells out and reinforces the right of the states who are signatories to this, to their national sovereignty and their legal ability to make their own internal decisions. So all of the things that it's being criticized for, in fact, don't exist. And that is precisely why I wouldn't sign on to it. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't sign on to a document that was legally binding because it's legally binding, okay? But I wouldn't sign on to this because it's not legally binding. Because that, if that sounds like a contradiction, it really isn't. Because you either sign on to, if I'm refusing to sign on to it because something's legally binding, I don't want to be bound by the provisions of this, okay? If I'm not signing on to it because it's not legally binding, it's because it's pointless. What's the point of me signing on to a declaration that I have that doesn't require for me to do anything? So it doesn't. The document doesn't spell out anything that we're supposed to do.
Okay,
here.
So what really should happen with this document is it gets dropped through a shredder.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it would do.
The
bigger the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd provide it. And I'd light the scraps on fire to make sure nobody can put it back together again.
And by the way, one thing I will say about this that it talks a lot about is the document is about trying to find ways to alleviate whatever the situation is that compels people to want to leave their home country and go to different countries as well. Now that may be problematic, again, if it was binding, because you could interpret that as saying, well, we have to do a global transfer of wealth. And I know that there are people out there who are listening and go, so what's so big about that? What's so bad about that? Well,
everything.
Okay, yeah, well, great. Give to Oxfam if that's what you want to do. I don't care, but,
But that doesn't, because you're talking in theory and you're talking in, without looking at the present government in charge. You're just looking at it from a academic point of view, if I can put it that way. And what I'm saying is that academics be damned if these guys get their hands on it, and they passed it, by the way. It is now something they've accepted, no matter what anybody else in the House had to say about it.
Well, it hasn't. It hasn't been signed yet. It's scheduled to be signed next week, I think.
Okay, well, it's going to get signed because the Liberals, Trudeau wants it, therefore it's going to happen. That's the thing about a majority. He can get what he wants, and there's nothing the Conservatives and the NDP aren't going to help him, and neither is Elizabeth May. But so he's going to get this. But the problem is that they will treat this as if it is binding, and that's what makes me so furious, is this document. First of all, they wasted, how much money was wasted creating this document in the first place? A document that we both agree is a complete and utter waste of time.
Right.
Okay, so why do that in the first place?
Well, that's a fair criticism of pretty much everything that the United Nations does.
Precisely. So
not everything, but mostly.
What do they do that's worthwhile?
Well, I think that there are some things that the UN has done that has been that the UN oversees that has been effective. The World Health Organization generally has been,
but they can do that on their own without the UN.
No argument. But I'm just saying that it is a UN agency. The International Civil Aviation organization that sets the protocols and rules and standards for international air travel, is also actually a United Nations body.
Same answer.
Okay. Well, but what you're saying is, what do they do? And I'm going, well, there are a few agencies that are attached to the United Nations. Okay, so you could have an agency doing this without the United Nations. I get that.
Yeah.
But that's not the question you asked.
That's fair enough. Okay, so fine. So they do two things. Everything else is a colossal mud bath.
Boondoggle.
Boondoggle. Call it what you want. Look at Haiti. Look at what's going on in Africa. Look what's going on. You pick the area. Show me, because their core mandate is to prevent wars, to give countries a place to sort out the differences without having to draw the sword. And they have failed at that almost without exception. The only example you can point to, and there are mitigating factors on this, is Cyprus. Because the Cypriots and the Turks, who have the island split in half, will be very, very peaceful as long as there's peacekeepers there, until they get within about 3 or 4 months of the end of the mandate. Then they start taking pot shots at each other, and the UN goes, "Oh, violence has flared up. We got to bring in more troops, or we got to keep the mandate going," because both the Turks and the Cypriots realize having the UN troops there is great for their economy. It's got nothing to do with whether they want to fight each other, and that's the only thing you can point to. Everything else has been a dog's breakfast. Anyway, so with that said, this is why when I see stuff coming out of New York, when I see it headed our way, when we have people coming here from the UN telling us how terrible we treat our indigenous peoples while the people in Haiti rot, or the people in Darfur starve, clean up your own backyard before you worry about us. And so that's why I have no patience for this, and I don't think that Trudeau, who wants a seat on the Security Council and will do anything to get one, even though it's a non-voting seat and a temporary one at best, he wants to be the first Canadian Prime Minister to end up with a seat on the UN Security Council. That's his, at least from as I understand it, what his big goal is.
We've been on the Security Council before a few times.
Have we?
Yeah.
Well, he wants to be there.
Yeah, I know. It's and I think it's quite undignified. I don't understand why there's this idea of the Security Council. It's such a prestigious thing. We have to work hard and lobby to get ourselves a seat in the Security Council. To me it's been I don't get it at all. I really don't. I don't see the point.
Neither do I, and that's why I would prefer. I think both of us agree that just drop this thing through a shredder and send in the bill for the electricity to run it.
Okay.
All right. There's a couple other things, of course, that are on the menu here.
I'm surprised that more people haven't got in touch with us and said, "Oh no, we support this," or.
I think we're preaching to the choir.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't think there's many people out there who, once they learn about this thing, have much support for it. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't support it. Again, I don't want people to think I support it. Please, people. I am not becoming a champion of the United Nations.
No, and I wasn't accusing you of that, by the way.
Heaven forfend.
All right, so Trudeau.
Oh, no, I know where you're going to go.
Yeah.
No, come on. Let's talk about oil. Let's talk about
oil.
Come on, yes, oil, Alberta. No,
That's right.
Seriously, is this the biggest?
Trudeau was an idiot. Let's move on.
Okay.
Down in Argentina, he was an idiot. Okay. Subject closed. Let's move on.
And we were just as bad, because I know you want to criticize him for his comments about gender equality and all this stuff, and there was a gender equality conference or sub-conference or side conference to the G20, or I don't know what it was or anything.
It was a waste of time.
We're just as bad because we did both of those songs, both of those versions of Baby It's Cold Outside.
Oh, man.
And we did it for the purpose of gender equality.
Yeah.
Because we believe
and how much did that cost the Canadian taxpayer?
Because we believe in Me Too.
That's right. Okay.
But I want to talk about this oil business in Alberta because I'm frankly astonished.
Well, set the table first.
Okay, so we there's in Alberta, because the oil is Alberta's landlocked. Okay, so when you produce oil in Alberta, to get it to market is a big problem because we don't have the pipelines to do it. So how they do it in Alberta is essentially, it's complicated, but to boil it down to the most simplistic way possible, and I just misused the word simplistic, okay, the simplest terms possible, is to say that Alberta oil is sold internationally, which means to the United States, at a huge discount because it's so hard to get it there. And so what's happened is, even though with the world price of oil falling, first of all, in Alberta, they never, ever, ever get what you see as the world price of oil, okay? So right now, the price of oil per barrel on the open market for Alberta oil is so low that producers are losing money producing it. Plus, there's a glut. So they've got a lot more oil than they can move. They've produced, their storage is over full, and all of this is depressing the price of oil in Alberta, and it's causing some significant problems for the oil producers. Mm-hmm. So they all get together with the government with this great scheme, and how they're going to prop up the price of oil is they've all agreed to reduce the production of oil. And actually, the government in Alberta has actually imposed a mandatory reduction of oil production in Alberta.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have done this without consultations with the players of the oil industry. So as a result of this decision, stock prices for oil, the companies have gone up. The price of oil in Alberta is, I don't know what it was today, but it's going to stabilize and it's going to go up. Okay, so that's basically what they've done. Now, the reason that I'm surprised and I just completely disagree with it, without being unsympathetic to the producers and the people who are working in the oil fields in Alberta. Don't get me wrong. Again, I do feel for their pain. I do understand that, especially at this time of the year, what they're going through. I get it. But this is not legal in the real world. Okay, it's called a cartel. And if you and I, Nick, and three of our friends were producing widgets, and we were the only people producing widgets in Canada, and we decided to get together and go, let's agree to play around with the price of widgets. We're going to agree amongst ourselves on limiting the widget production. I'll do so many, you, Nick, do so many, George, Brian, Bob, right. And let's throw an Anne in there so that we have some gender equality, if not balance, okay? That's my doffing my hat to our illustrious Prime Minister down in Argentina, okay? We would go to jail for that.
Yes, that's called price fixing.
Okay, it's not legal. It's not legal, and ultimately, a lot of what they have the problems in Alberta have stemmed from government interference in the process in the first place.
Well, let's broaden this out a little bit, because this goes to the heart of why government should stay out of the free market in the first place. Take in Ontario, we had the wind and solar farm subsidies. At one point, electricity produced by, I think it was solar panels, was 82 cents a kilowatt hour, and they were signing 20-year contracts on that. Now, there was no way electricity was worth even a tenth of that. 6, 8, 10 cents was a lot more like it. So the government came in and propped these industries up. And the problem that is going on now is that as these subsidies disappear, you're going to see huge pain in that segment. Look at GM. I mean, they got bailed out 10 years ago to the tune of $11 billion, and now here they are closing plants in Canada. Well, if the government had simply stayed out of it. Let me tell you a little story about President Coolidge back in the 1900s, okay, right around the turn of the last century. There was a huge problem where they had thousands and thousands of people laid off. And they were trying to get the president to do something. So you know what he did? He locked himself in his office and he unplugged his phone. And he stayed there for 3 days. till the phone quit ringing.
Of course, you could do that in those days.
Yes, you could. But the point is, he knew enough not to interfere with the marketplace. It would correct itself over time and relatively quickly. There was a stock market crash in 1920. Most people don't know about this, but it was a huge crash and caused all kinds of problems. But because the government stayed out of the marketplace, it allowed for the greatest boom period, the roaring 20s, that we've ever seen in the West. The reason why the 2019 crash was so bad was because somebody tried to fix it. And that's how come governments need to stay the heck out of the marketplace. So when you come forward today and you see governments or people like Jason Kenney, well-intentioned, saying, look, we got to cut production. It's an OPEC of the West, okay, is what they're trying to establish. Because once you give those companies that power, how do you take it back?
Well, it's not the companies that have the power. This is government mandated.
All right,
this is
fine.
the government of Alberta.
Now try and take that back from the government.
Well, yeah.
That's a whole nightmare.
Yeah, I know. It's very discouraging because, I just, when we talk about politicians actually standing up for what they believe in and telling the truth and taking the chance that people are not going to vote for them because people don't agree with what they're saying. And my attitude is, look, let people not agree with you, but at least say what you have to say, because you're going to change people's minds. And what does this have to do with what's going on in Alberta now and all of the hand-wringing about General Motors here in Ontario? Is that, this is an argument that we won back in the late 70s and early 80s and through into the early 90s, the argument against government interference in the free market. Now, we never eliminated all government interference in the free market, okay? But we eliminated a whole lot of it because people really started to understand that you allow the market to operate freely and don't try to control it, don't overregulate it, don't try to pick winners and losers, and ultimately things settle down the way they're going to settle down.
Yeah, they sort themselves out.
They sort themselves out. And the reality is that there are going to be people that are going to benefit from the change. There are people that are going to suffer from the change, and that's just reality. And if there's one thing that we've got to get into our heads in politics, it's that you have to deal with the real world the way it really is, and stop trying to create these utopias and these oh gosh, if only we put money here or there, that we could change nature, that we could stop the climate from changing. Yeah. You have to deal with the real world the way it really is. And the real world, the way it really is in Alberta right now, is that you can't get the damned oil to the market. Now, you want to change that. You want to forget about overregulation, as Roy was talking about last week, okay? The most environmentally safe and sound way to transport oil are pipelines. So, if you're going to have processes and protocols that actually prevent the construction of pipelines to get oil to the international market, then that's it. So you get out of the way of the private sector, have reasonable, sensible environmental laws that protect the environment, but understand that you have to get the oil to the market. And trains and planes and automobiles are not the answer in this case.
Well, as he was pointing out last week, a rail car holds about 1,000 barrels. So if you're going to move 300,000 barrels or 400,000 barrels of oil to market, guess how many train cars you need? They just decommissioned 20,000 of them. So, you're creating a shortage that now you got to go out and buy brand new ones that you have to buy rolling stock you already have been decommissioned. Now, I'm not saying every single one of those cars was fit to roll, but 20,000 of them? That's a lot of rolling stock you don't have access to all of a sudden.
Well, and this is the reality. The reality, again, is just the way you're describing it. Look, you're not going to do it with rail. You're not going to do it with trucks. You're not going to do it with planes, for Pete's sakes, okay?
I had one guy suggest mules.
Okay, look, well, you're not...
Good luck with that.
You're not going to do it with mules either, guys. Look, you're only going to do it with pipelines, and if you're not going to allow pipelines, then get out of the business altogether. And I'm sorry if that means that jobs are lost. I get it, and I understand the implications for the Canadian economy as a whole, but you're not going to solve this problem by interfering in the market the way you're interfering. It's a short-term solution, and I guarantee you this, there are people out there that are going to make a lot of money on stock pricing on this stuff.
Amen to that.
Okay. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be you or me, Nick.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, look, guys, it's coming up to 2 hours, so we've had a lot of fun tonight. Nick, do you have anything that you want to say in closing?
Just tune in next week, bring a friend, and we'll have more stuff for you. And try that lemon water. A gallon of water for the juice of 4 lemons. Mix it up, let it get cold. Oh, it's amazing. All right. With that said, we'll wish you all a good night. We'll see you all again next week, same time, same place.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in, guys.